tell me how you came to write this book, because it seems so different.
As women, we need to take control of our financial life. We need to wake up. My hope is that the book will trigger ideas for women, for them to say, I need to take care of my children, I need to take care of myself, I need to establish my own credit.
I see so many women that are victims of financial abuse, and we don't think of that as being a form of abuse or control that needs to be addressed. 53% lose a job due to their abuser. 99% of domestic violence victims also suffer financial abuse. That's 100% part of domestic violence. Welcome to the show. I'm Michelle O'Neill. Today, I have a very special guest. I am so honored to have this guest with us. Sharon Lechter is my guest today. For those of you who live under a rock and don't know Sharon, she is a internationally renowned author, has sold I don't know how many books. I'm sure she can tell us how many books. She is the co-author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad series. She is the author of Think and Grow Rich for Women. She has a new book, and I'm not even going down all the list of it, but a new book, How Money Works for Women. This, I think, may be my favorite book of all of them, just because it is so full of every page has a tip, a trick, a hack, just for women. So welcome to my show, Sharon. I am so honored that you are here with me in person on a rainy day in Dallas. Thank you so much.
I'm delighted to be here. Absolutely.
So I want to start kind of with your background, because at least for me, I'm just so impressed with your background. You started out as a CPA. So tell me how you kind of got from a CPA to being this world-renowned author and speaker.
Well, it's just evolved. Sometimes you just have to go where life leads you. And I grew up in a very lower middle class home. My parents were both entrepreneurs. We lived in a little tiny house between my mom's beauty shop and my dad's used car lot. And we owned rental properties. I say I've been a real estate investor since I was 10, because I had to go scrub out bathrooms between tenants. We had orange groves. So and we talked about money at the dinner table. And then I was really embarrassed by where we lived. My parents' friends were CEOs or military officers. So I swore I was going to be a professional, right? And so I, first generation, go to college, only woman in my accounting classes, business classes, and one of the very first women who started in public accounting. And I was actually going double major, genetics and accounting. I realized
that's two different majors.
Yes. So I figured I could get out of school. I realized I could get out of school in 4 years here. It was going to be 8 years here, and chose accounting. But it was great because I learned so much in public accounting. I learned how companies succeeded, and probably more importantly, I learned how businesses failed. And I also realized how few people understand money. And as we continued through life, I got an offer to leave public accounting. I made that decision, and that's how I met my husband. And so I just started becoming more entrepreneurial at that point, doing things on the side and running my own tax practice. And then I met the inventor of the first talking children's book, right? The books that had the sound strips down the side. And I helped him build that around the world. And I learned so much about publishing. I also learned about power of association. We had this technology. This was 1987. It's hard to imagine, but kids had no screens. They had no electronics. So it was like, how can we get parents to trust us? And we did deals with little companies like Disney, Warner Brothers, Sesame Street, Marvel Comics. And so it really exploded us around the world. And we sold that company in 1991, and that's when we relocated to Arizona. And in 92, our oldest son graduated from high school and went to college, and left in September, came home in December in credit card debt. And I was devastated.
Back then I was in college in the late 80s. And I remember being in college, they would just hand out credit card applications like it was candy or water.
So he got to campus and there was a table, free pizza, free money. Another one, free T-shirt, free money. He had a really good time his first semester in college, like a lot of young people did. And before he realized that he was in credit card debt. And that was December of 1992 when he came home, and we realized he'd gotten himself in deep. And that's when I dedicated the rest of my career to financial literacy and financial education. Started working with the school systems. My hair used to be red, but if you ever worked with school systems, you know why it gets turned white. And it was very frustrating, still is. I'm still working with school systems, and it takes them a very long time to change. But I started creating curriculum, and fast forward a few years, my husband called me, and he had this guy that came to his office with an idea for a board game, and it's Robert Kiyosaki, and I met him at the first beta test for the cash flow board game. And loved it. I was the only one that got out of the rat race. It was drawn out on a piece of paper, the different playing pieces for different caliber bullets. So it was a great first impression. But it was exactly what I was teaching, the power of buying, building, creating income-producing assets. Instead of exchanging time for money, invest your time in creating assets. And so I volunteered because of my background. I knew all the sources and the ability to help him build that. So I volunteered to help him just as a friend. He told me he wanted to charge $200 for the game. I said, that's pretty pricey.
Yeah.
Maybe we should write a brochure that explains the philosophy that would convince people they want to invest that kind of money in the game. And that's when he asked me to be his partner and asked me to write that brochure with him. And that brochure was Rich Dad, Poor Dad. We never expected for it to take off and create a life of its own. And nor do we expect to write a bunch of books, but people wanted more. So, okay, we'll do a trilogy. Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Cash Flow Quadrant, Rich Dad's Guide to Investing. Oh, no. So in the 10 years that we were partners, we wrote 15 books together. And then I started the Rich Dad Advisor series. But that's kind of a long story of how I got into it, because I realized I was given the gift of understanding about money. I was given the gift and the ability to communicate a very difficult subject in simple terms that people could understand and not be threatened by it. So many of us are so fearful around money. And so I said, I have to share my knowledge and help people take control of their financial lives.
But I think that what you said is the most important. I think it's the ability to communicate it, because I think, you know, as women especially, we are not necessarily raised with the understanding or the education about money. I mean, I know that my dad was very intentional about raising me to understand money. He raised me to learn how to pay my bill at the restaurant or to tip, you know, to take care of myself, because he very intentionally, he had this saying of like raising me, you know, that the man isn't the plan, you know, that I didn't need a man. And maybe he went a little too far in that and maybe went overboard. But, you know, but I was raised to understand money. But I don't think most
that's very unique.
Children are raised that way. I think boys are, but I don't think young girls are.
Well, even boys aren't really educated. They're educated to get a job, right? And that's what school teaches us: get a job and exchange time for money. And so that's my mantra is to understand the power of assets. That's my favorite word on earth. Assets. I say assets are sexy. And very few people understand the power. People talk a lot about having passive income now. And I go, let's not focus on passive income. Let's focus on the assets that generate the passive income.
Right.
Because they're the economic engines. And I go, once you have an asset in your asset column, it's like having an employee with no personality problems, right? Because it's constantly working for you 24/7. And so that's been my drive, and I'm as passionate about it today as I was in December of 2022.
And I think the ability to communicate about it. I mean, I think the ability to communicate anything. And I know you're a fan of the Cardones, am I? I think that just the ability to communicate in general is maybe the key skill that almost everybody is missing in our society, maybe. But the ability to communicate and talk about money is so key. And understanding it is one thing, but I think the ability to communicate about it is very important.
And get past the emotion.
Yes.
Because so many of us were raised in households where we said things like, save for a rainy day, pinch your pennies, we can't afford it.
Yeah.
Our money doesn't grow on trees. And all those things are negative. They have one thing in common. So you grow up as a youngster and you hear money negative, money negative, money negatives, and we end up developing a scarcity mindset. And it's in our subconscious, and it is hard to get rid of that. You have to recognize it and then work to replace that scarcity mindset with an abundance mindset, because you're going to be afraid you're never going to have enough money. And then when you create some success, you're afraid you're going to lose it. And so it's really important to pay attention to what's happening in your subconscious. That's why all my programs, all my teachings, I combine money moves with mindset moves. So you have to change your mindset.
Right. So you also have worked in 2 presidents' administrations, and I like the fact that they're 2 different political parties. So how did that come to be that you worked for 2 different political party presidents?
Well, sometimes you have to close one door for other doors to open. And I share this because it's really important for people. We get into our own little comfort zone. 10 years into our partnership, I was no longer aligned with my partner, with Rich Dad. He wanted to go into franchising. It was a great model for us. It was a terrible model for the franchisees. So I made the decision to leave Rich Dad, and it was the height of our success, millions of dollars every month. But I just couldn't stay there. And that was March of 2007. And later that year, I thought Rich Dad was my legacy. I was like, okay, now what? What else is there to me? I helped build the largest personal finance brand in the world, and we're impacting millions of people. Now what? And I got a call one Friday night. I was actually having my own little pity party trying to figure out what my next chapter was going to be. And it was President Bush. And so I was invited to be on the very first President's Advisory Council for Financial Literacy. What a gift. And yes, I served both Bush and President Obama. But I wouldn't have had that call had I still been at Rich Dad. So I share that with people. I say, sometimes you have to make a move. You have to make it know what you know is right for you. Stand in your truth, stand in your integrity, and maybe not know what's going to be on the other side of that. But in addition to that call, a few months later, in March of 2008, I got the call from the Napoleon Hill Foundation asking me we know what was happening to the economy in 2008. Asking me to help re-energize and reinvigorate the teachings of Napoleon Hill. And that was such a gift.
Yeah.
I did 4 books with the Napoleon Hill Foundation.
Right.
And yes, you have one.
And I have one of them right here, Think and Grow Rich for Women. I don't know if the glare is, there it is, Think and Grow Rich for Women, one of my favorites too.
Yeah, and it was something that I read Think and Grow Rich when I was 19.
Yeah.
I probably didn't realize the impact it had on my life until I was in my 30s, but such an honor to get involved with the foundation. I had known them because we were in the same business. We'd be sitting next to each other at book fairs, and such a pleasure to be able to work with them. And it was an honor to be able to write 3 Feet from Gold was the first book, and then I brought out Outwitting the Devil, which was a book that was hidden away for 75 years, talking about how fear holds us back. And that book is really what accomplished getting the younger generation aware and involved in the teachings of Napoleon Hill. So it's just incredible to see the response I get from it. I was at an event last night, and a young man came with his copy, and it had like dog ears writing, and it just makes me so excited when I see that. But yeah, it was just been incredible. I certainly wouldn't have had that phone call had I still been at Rich Dad. And so I share that because, again, I trigger everybody in the audience. Is there a door in your life you need to close so other doors of opportunity will open?
I love that because my mother was wise beyond her years or her education, but she would always say, sometimes your worst day in life turns out to be your best day. And like you said, you were having your own pity party, and then you get a call from the president, And sometimes you just don't know when that worst day is going to turn out to be your best day.
And Napoleon Hill says, out of every adversity comes the seed of an equal or greater benefit.
Exactly.
So sometimes it takes you a while to figure out what the benefit is, but it's there.
Right. Well, I want to talk first about Think and Grow Rich, because one of my favorite things, and it's very early in the book, but one of my favorite things in the book is when you talk about how men and women see success differently. And I think that it's just so fascinating to me that men seem to see success somewhat simplistically, not saying that they're simple, but they see it very, straight. Success is making money. Success is a hotter wife. Success is a better parking spot, I think is the examples used in the book, where women seem to see success as a little bit more deep or complicated. I thought that was, I just think that is so fascinating. And it really speaks to kind of some of the differences in men and women. And as women, this was written in 2007. I wrote it down.
2013.
2013.
Yeah.
2014 is the publication date. So, as women have progressed in the workplace, I think that really speaks to kind of some of the differences between men and women as they have progressed in corporate America, even. Some of the complexities of how women approach management styles or leadership styles. And I'm a women's leadership person, and so that's something that I study. But I found that to be so interesting of how men and women approach success differently.
Well, the original Think and Grow Rich book, when I read it every year, but it's really, when he wrote it, which was released in 1937, so it took him 25 years to write it. But at that time, there were no women in business, so it was a very male-centric book. And in it, success was all about money, right? And so when I agreed to do Think and Grow Rich for Women, I followed the same format, using the same principles, except for I added one last chapter, One Big Life. But as part of that, my subtitle was Success and Significance, all right? Because I believe for women, it's not just dollars, it's actually impact.
Right.
We're more concerned about making an impact. And I know I've made decisions in my life that were probably cost me money, but were the right thing for me to do to have greater impact and help other people.
And women just see things much more holistically than just simply winning. They see it more as winning and, what is the difference it makes or what is the value proposition. That reminds me so much of Zig Ziglar and like the success and significance.
Zig talks about you make enough, if you want to be successful, you strive to make other people successful.
Yeah.
Right?
You also talk in the book about, in Think and Grow Rich, about Sarah Blakely. Mm-hmm. And I found that interesting that, that many years ago, 10 years ago or whatever, you talk about Sarah Blakely being the first woman billionaire for the women's underwear line that she developed. And she's still going strong, innovating. She has a whole clothing line now. And then I have on her new shoe wear, and that she's just literally come out with, and she's innovating her shoe wear. And so I found that interesting, that you do talk about Sarah Blakely and Think and Grow Rich for Women. And here we are, still with Sarah Blakely, just still being an innovator. I was lucky enough to hear her speak a month or so ago talking about her shoes. And she was saying that what motivated her, what inspired her to create these new Sneaks shoes is that she heard Christian Louboutin speak on one of the morning shows. And he made a comment that if women found his shoes comfortable, he would be offended. And his comment offended her to her core. And she decided in that moment that she was going to create a heel that would be comfortable for women and just reinvent and, rethink entirely the women's heel industry. And, if there's anybody in the world that can reinvent an industry, it's bound to be Sarah Blakely. So I immediately had to go out and buy the shoes. So
I love them. Yeah, I absolutely love them.
Yeah. I think when I first looked at them, I thought that's not necessarily what I would wear with a, professional dress. But then I thought, if Sarah Blakely says I can, and
you say, why not? That's my mantra. Why not?
Why not?
Why not?
So,
yeah.
And they cost almost as much as a Christian Louboutin shoes. So why not?
Well, he doesn't have to worry. Mine are all very uncomfortable. So
They are. And her point was like, he's never even worn his shoes. So, and she wears hers. And so they actually are very comfortable for a pair of heels. So I'm very fascinated with her. And she is actually one of the women that are out there that I just admire so much for the things that she's innovating. So my question for you, that long story, my question for you is, who is somebody right now that is kind of moving and shaking in the world? Who is a woman that you admire that's doing something right now?
Oh, my goodness. Well, there are tons of women, and most of them are the ones that have their heads down and they're making an impact in the world. They're not doing it for ego, and I think that's a big difference too. Women take, Sarah Blakely. She is so down to earth. She doesn't have a giant ego, and she deserves to have one. She's earned it, and so I think that's something that. And I was on the board for 25 years of Women Presence Organization. So a network that went all over the world that are CEOs and presidents of their companies. And many of them you've never heard of before, but yet they are the undercurrent, the foundation of success for women in this country. And I think that's one thing. Women tend not to stand up and take credit. Right. They have their nose to the grindstone and are working hard. So I respect every single female out there that's working and creating value.
Isn't that the way of it, though, when you think about the difference in women and men's leadership styles, that men tend to kind of put themselves out there and brag on themselves a little bit more, where women tend to do the work and not necessarily look for the glory. And sometimes I think that holds us back.
It does. I think women need to find that way to stand in their own power, to be proud of themselves. Because if we do that, if we get that self-confidence and we stand in our success, we will attract other people to us and give them the courage and the motivation to create that success in their life.
Right. And I think that it also, it serves as a mentoring role for young women, for young girls, when they see women. And you talk in Think and Grow Rich about Oprah, for example, and the examples of other women achieving success, like Sarah Blakely and Oprah, and there's
Sandra Day O'Connor, our first female Supreme Court justice.
Yes,
what an incredible woman, and she was all about civil discourse. She could reach across the aisle and get opposing viewpoints and have a conversation. And she's one of my mentors, and she was just incredible. I miss her dearly.
She was from Arizona, right? Yeah. I know she was definitely somebody that I admired as a lawyer. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I mean, one of the things that I admired about her was the relationship that she had with Antonin Scalia, that, very diametrically opposing political beliefs and maybe even core beliefs. But they would go to the opera together, and they enjoyed the opera, and they would just be able to have commonality and friendship, but yet also
almost a lost art today.
Yeah,
we have to bring it back. That's
right.
The book I'm working on right now, Michelle, is Living in Grace. Because I think that we just need a lot more grace in the world,
I agree. I love that word. That's one of my most favorite words. I'm a word person. Mm-hmm. My mother, whenever I was a baby, we didn't have money. We were very poor, and we didn't have money to go do things. So she would put me in the car, and she loved to go to the grocery store, but we didn't have a lot of money to buy groceries. So she'd put me in the basket, and we would go up and down every aisle of the grocery store. And she would get a Reader's Digest, and we would do the word power in the Reader's Digest. And of course, I was tiny, so I wouldn't know the words, but that's how I learned all my life. She would do the word power in the Reader's Digest. And so I became a word person. And so I love words. And I have a very wide vocabulary. The people that work for me often tell me I make them have to go open dictionaries, which I think is good for them. But
my husband is that way too. And I was like, why don't I know that word? I got to go look it up.
But grace is actually one of my favorite words, because I think that it just is so powerful in the meaning of it, not only in the spiritual meaning, but just in the meaning that just between people, I think we need to show each other so much more grace. So I love that you're writing that book. So so the next thing I want to talk about is your next to newest book, I guess, because you're writing another new one. So tell me how you came to write this book, because it seems so different than your other books that you've written.
Well, it is, and it's much more specific and hands-on money advice, much like my programs. I have online programs about money mastery programs that are much more like what's in the book. But the company WealthWave came to me, and they wanted to, they had done a book on how money works, and they wanted to do something for women. And I've spoken for them several times, and they said, we really would like to have you do this with us because of your level of expertise. And I fell in love with the whole project because it's like a graphic novel.
Yes.
It's all 4-color. And we take women from every decade of life, from 19 to 86, and talk about the various things that women face, like starting a business or going to college, planning a wedding. But then there's also the lady that finds out her son is a special needs child, so she has to redesign how she lives. We talk about the resources that are there to support them. Then I have a woman that left an abusive marriage with 2 children and had to start her life over again.
Yes.
And then the woman that becomes a sandwich generation. Her older father moves back in with her, and her son moves back in with her, and the dynamics of how to sort through that. That's happening to a lot of people in the world right now. And then my absolute favorites are the women that have been married for 25 years, looking forward to a great retirement, and the husband decides to trade her in on a younger model.
Yep.
And all of a sudden, she finds herself with no credit in her own name, no access to the assets because everything's in his name. Mm-hmm. And so we talk about those things because there's a stat that I talk about in the book, Michelle, that I think is like the most startling stat, even for me. 80% of men die married. 80% of women die single.
Yes.
And so we need to wake up. As women, we need to take control of our financial life.
Right.
Because we are going to be solely responsible. Plus, we already control 60% of the U.S. wealth, personal wealth. And over the next few years, we're going to inherit trillions of dollars. And it's our responsibility to understand how to receive it, how to invest it, how to grow it, and how to preserve it for future generations. And yet, women tend to give up that responsibility. And then there's even the one where happily married a long, long time, and her husband dies, the 86-year-old, and she has all the wealth, but nothing's in her name. And so she's tied up. She can't get access to things because it wasn't properly prepared and structured. So my hope is that the book will trigger ideas for women, for them to say, I need to take care of this. I need to take care of my children. I need to take care of myself. I need to establish my own credit. Because women don't understand, your credit score is not the same as your husband's. It's separate. And if you don't have any credit in your own name, it's going to be really hard if you find yourself single.
And that's exactly what I like about this book is it's so tangible and so real for any woman, wherever she's at. And if you're at one spot right now in the book, you can really see yourself, or you know somebody who's at another spot in the book. And of course, you know that I'm a divorce lawyer, and so I see a lot of my clients in the book. But the one that I really liked, there's 2 of them I want to talk about, but there's the one of them I really liked was Sarah, the real estate agent, who was getting a divorce and was a victim of domestic violence. And that this one really struck me because of the financial abuse. And, I think, domestic violence obviously is a very physical form of violence, and that is a very horrible thing. But I see so many women that are victims of financial abuse. And we don't think of that as being a form of abuse or control because it's maybe not as tangible and actionable in divorce court. It's difficult for it to be actionable in divorce court. But it is definitely a form of control or abuse that needs to be addressed. And you said in here that 53% lose a job due to their abuser. 70% are not even able to have a job due to financial control or abuse. And I thought that was just incredible. 99% of domestic violence victims also suffer financial abuse. Yeah. And that really rang true for me because that's 100% part of domestic violence. It's not just a physical, beating, but it's also the financial control.
Right. And it really is. It's the loss of power. The abuser wants to separate you from your friends, your family, any kind of control that you have over your life. And sometimes it starts with financial abuse before it gets to domestic violence. But sometimes they go hand in hand, and it's just the way, all of a sudden the honeymoon's over and you start seeing a side of the spouse that you never saw before.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I think even without, physical violence, I think financial control is definitely something that women, young women particularly entering marriage or before they get married, should watch out for.
When I was writing Think and Grow Rich for Women, so it was about 15 years ago, I had a birthday party and I went, and there were like 14 of my closest friends there. And I asked them, because I was like, I want to see this, because they're all women of wealth. I said, how many of you sign your tax returns without knowing what's in them? All but one raised their hand because they let their husbands or let their partners do it. And the one that raised her hand was single, and she owned her own business. So it was like, okay, this was frightening for me.
Right.
They just hear sign this and have no idea what assets they have or where they are or how to get to them. And that is frightening.
It's frightening for me as a divorce lawyer because of how many women I see that come into my office, whether it's the husband's already left them for the newer, younger model, or they've discovered something and they affirmatively want to seek the divorce, and they have no idea what their assets are, what their debts are, what their financial picture looks like. They have no idea. They've never seen a bank statement. They don't even know where they bank at. They don't know. They just know it's been provided. And the number of those women who are surprised at what they don't have, it's sad and it's shocking sometimes to them when they learn that their lifestyle is not going to get to be continued. And I think if there's one thing that I wish that especially young women would know is that they've got to stand on their own and take care of themselves. That, as my daddy would say, the man cannot be the plan.
That's right. I used to say that all the time. And I think, one of the other things is transitioning these days. And I don't know the exact stat because I didn't prepare for this one. But it's like 38% of married households, a woman is the primary breadwinner. So there's a huge shift in the social dynamics of the household.
Right.
And with that is coming issues like more domestic abuse. That power shift of who's bringing home the bacon is creating an opportunity for men and women to come together and figure out how they're going to work together and how they're going to live together and how they're going to manage their household. And so I always tell people, and it's in the book, when you plan on getting married, have a money date.
Yeah.
Right? Get together and talk about what your parents' philosophies were about money. Because it's going to be funny. You're going to have some laughs. But it's also going to reveal some things that you need to discuss between the two of you on how to handle your money.
Right. Because I think so many times young women approach marriage from just the love standpoint, the hearts and the eyes standpoint. But I think the point is missed that marriage is not just about the love and the honeymoon and the hearts. It's also a business. It's also a business relationship. And so you've got to deal with both the honeymoon part and the business part of the marriage, and hopefully from the beginning of it so that you're preparing for the money side and the business side of it. Or you aren't really a team, because if you leave all of that to the husband, then you're going to find yourself someday, some of the stats I know, the average length of marriage is 8 years in our country.
Yeah, it's scary.
And that means there's a lot of marriages that are less than 8 years and some that make it more.
And I saw a stat, 50% of first-time marriages end in divorce. I think it's 65% of second, 75% or something.
That's right.
Marriages end in divorce. It's kind of, it's really sad. It just breaks my heart. We just celebrated 44 years.
Well, I'm at 18, so I've got a ways to go to catch you, but I'm way ahead of the statistic for me.
Yeah.
And my husband and I are blowing all the statistics out because I'm his third wife. So we're beating all the statistics, but I think that we try to approach it from a team concept. But it's unfortunate, when some women, I think, put all their eggs in the man basket and don't understand that, statistically at least, unfortunately, the chances of it lasting may not be there. You also talk about this lady named Hope, and she's an older lady. She's 62 and finds herself getting divorced. And This one is really close to home for me because I do represent so many women who are over 50. And I find this dichotomy in statistics because on the one hand, the statistics of women who are inheriting the wealth is very striking, that there's so much wealth being passed down to women. But then there's this other statistic that I also find striking, and you cited here, that there's this, in here you say 42% of older women rely on Social Security for 50% or more of their income. And so it seems to me that there is kind of this division of there's some women who are getting divorced and over 50 who are not getting a sufficient division of assets, who are not, therefore getting a inheritance or, whatever, who are then having to rely on their job skills that they may not have maintained during their marriage, who haven't, been contributing to Social Security or their own retirement and are really not, able to live much beyond the poverty level. So they're not in the statistic of inheriting this great wealth. And then there's this other group of women over here who are in this inheriting the great wealth category. So I think I wonder, and I haven't seen a statistic on it, but I wonder if there isn't kind of becoming this great divide of women over 50, where there's a lot of them that are inheriting this wealth, but there's this other kind of divide that aren't. And it breaks my heart when I find these women who are in this category where they're not going to have a great lifestyle after 50 because of the divorce scenario.
Well, I know I have the stats in there, but so many women, when they get divorced, drop below the poverty line. And that, is difficult because, again, they haven't established own credit. They have not maintained working skills. And so they are really left in the cold as to how they're going to take care of themselves. And one of the things most women don't understand is, even if you're divorced, if you've not gotten remarried, if you were married, I think it's 10 years, you are entitled to get Social Security at the level of your prior marriage husband. And that's something that a lot of women don't realize. And so you really have to educate yourself on how to best prepare for retirement and for Social Security.
Well, and that definitely has to be a factor in whether you get remarried or not.
Yes.
If you've got some handsome, good-smelling dude who's wanting to come along and marry you, you need to think about that pretty carefully because you might be getting your Social Security from your other guy over there. And I think we're seeing a rise in incidents of gray divorce as well, what we call a gray divorce over 50. There's a lot more of them happening, which is putting more women in that scenario. So, I would encourage any women out there who think their marriage is on the rocks, maybe go get some job skills, get a real estate license, and maybe go work on selling some real estate. I think we're going to have a boom in the real estate market coming up soon. So,
and it's never been easier to make money because of the internet.
Yeah.
There are ways, if you have a place that you frequent all the time and they have an affiliate program, sign up and start getting paid for sharing what you would like and what you enjoy so that others can do it. You get paid for it.
Right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Any of y'all out there who want a very easy read to learn about money, How Money Works for Women is a great book that Sharon has written. It's available on Amazon right now.
Or you can get it on my website, SharonLechter.com, and I'll autograph it.
Well, maybe you'll autograph mine for me today. So that has been Sharon Lechter. I have been so honored for her to be here in person, in studio with me today. I hope you guys have enjoyed it too. Thank you for joining me on my show today.